The story begins in a school classroom where the central figure, Lucy, is completely lost in her own thoughts. Although nature has gifted her with a sharp mind and academic potential, the school curriculum is the last thing on her mind at this moment. Instead of taking notes on the teacher's lecture, she is passionately working on a drawing, oblivious to everything around her. This systematic disregard for the educational process does not go unnoticed. The teacher, finally losing patience with the student's detachment, gives her a stern reprimand. The punishment is severe. Lucy is forbidden from returning to school without being accompanied by her parents, who are summoned for a serious discussion the very next morning. When the bell rang and classes ended, Lucy's close friend approached her, wanting to know how she planned to get out of this situation. At that moment, classmates appeared outside the window, signaling for the girls to join them outdoors. Lucy's friend, without a second thought, went out to the boys, but the protagonist herself remained in the classroom. All her attention was consumed by her mobile phone screen. She was desperately trying to contact her older brother, Sang Yan, who was living in a student hostel at the time. Lucy hoped he could come to the school instead of her parents and save her from a domestic scandal, but her brother persistently ignored her messages. Soon those same boys from the street entered the classroom. One of them, a longtime admirer of Lucy's talent and beauty, made another attempt to strike up a friendly conversation, but the girl didn't even look up, continuing to wait for a reply from her brother. Finally, the long-awaited notification arrived, but the joy was short-lived. Sang Yan, without even listening to the core of the problem or understanding his sister's difficult position, replied with a blunt refusal. Distressed by such indifference, Lucy left the school with her friend, complaining incessantly that her brother could never be relied upon in a moment of need. She came to the bitter conclusion that she would have to find the courage to ask her mother to visit the teacher. Upon returning home, Lucy hesitated for a long time before starting the conversation, choosing the softest words possible so as not to anger her mother. However, the situation took an unexpected turn. Her mother informed her that Sang Yan had unexpectedly returned from the hostel and was currently in his room. This news instantly lifted Lucy's spirits, and she rushed to him, hoping to persuade him in person. Pushing the door open, she froze in surprise. In her brother's place sat a completely unfamiliar, incredibly attractive young man with very pleasant features. This was Duan, Sang Yan's best friend and a key character in this story. A completely absurd thought popped into Lucy's head. She decided that her brother had decided on radical plastic surgery and completely changed his appearance. With full confidence in her assumption, she turned to the young man and asked exactly when he had undergone this transformation. Duan, who was clearly amused by the situation, invited her to come closer so she could see her mistake for herself. He explained that he was not Sang Yan, and at that moment the brother himself entered the room. Upon learning that his sister had mistaken his friend for him after plastic surgery, Sang Yan was furious. His pride was wounded by the fact that his sister could even entertain the thought that his already perfect face needed changing. He tried to leave, but Lucy blocked his path, begging for help with the school meeting. As expected, Sang Yan refused again. Lucy then resorted to trickery. She began to sob loudly and scream, creating the appearance that her brother had laid a hand on her. Their mother came running to the noise and immediately began scolding her son, even hitting him a few times for educational purposes. Duan, watching this scene from the side, was struck by how theatrical and mischievous this girl could be. Their mother led Sang Yan into another room for further lecturing, and Lucy, instantly stopping her crying, turned to Duan. She explained her problem and asked him to go to the school as her relative. At first, Duan didn't want to get involved, but Lucy presented a compelling argument. If he hadn't started joking about the plastic surgery situation, Sang Yan wouldn't have got angry and might have helped her. Admitting she was right, Duan agreed. Before leaving, he clarified her name and school, though Lucy still doubted that this almost complete stranger would actually keep his promise. All these events remained in the past, and the narrative shifts to the present time. 3 long years have passed, during which the characters' lives went on as usual. Lucy has turned into a charming young woman while retaining her characteristic personality. Descending to the living room one morning, she saw Sang Yan, who had returned home after a long absence. Tension could still be felt between them. Lucy ignored her brother, remembering how rarely he bothered to answer her letters and messages while he was away. Sang Yan had to put in a lot of effort to coax even a simple greeting out of his sister. During a family lunch, he asked his father for the car keys, explaining that he needed to pick up his things and a friend's luggage from a new hostel, which was now located much closer to their house. Lucy's heart skipped a beat. She immediately guessed that he was talking about Duan. Wanting to see him again, she offered her help in carrying the bags, pretending she just wanted to spend time with her brother. Despite Sang Yan's resistance, their parents insisted that he take his sister along. After school, Lucy went to her brother's new place of residence. Noticing her father's car, she looked inside and saw a cute toy on the seat, a fox doll that she really liked. At the moment she reached for the toy, she was interrupted by Duan's stern voice, asking who allowed her to touch his personal belongings. Lucy was stunned by this meeting after so many years. She was embarrassed by how much Duan had matured and improved in looks. He also recognized her immediately, calling her that little kid. Lucy was quick to object, stating that she was already a grown 11th grade student, not the 8th grader he remembered. Doon asked with a smile why such a grown-up girl was still reaching for children's dolls. He jokingly said he was going to throw it away, but Lucy took the fox for herself, claiming that age doesn't stop one from loving beautiful things. Doon only laughed, reminding her of that old debt for his help at school. Inside the hostel, Sang Yan displayed wonders of laziness, not helping his friend with the settling in at all. Lucy did not miss the opportunity to scold her brother for such behavior. When Sang Yan's other friends came into the room and tried to talk to the girl, her brother cut off all attempts at flirting, claiming that his friends were too scary and might frighten her. After introducing themselves, the guys began to chat, and Lucy decided to verify a story. She asked if it was true that a crowd of infatuated fans was chasing Sang Yan, as he himself had boasted to her. The friends were extremely surprised and began to tease him, saying they had never seen him in the company of girls. An irritated Sang Yan cast a vengeful glance at his sister, to which she responded with a funny face. Watching this, Doon realized that in her soul, Lucy remained the same little prankster. When he stepped very close to her to pick up a phone, Lucy flushed red with embarrassment again. Soon Doon had to leave for work, and he said goodbye. Lucy also decided to go home, turning down her brother's offer of a ride. In her haste, she accidentally left her notebook on the table in the hostel. Late that evening, Doon called her from her brother's phone to inform her of the find. Taking the opportunity, Lucy asked him for a favor to write an essay for her that was due tomorrow. Doon first suggested passing this task to Sang Yan, but Lucy was categorical. Her brother is absolutely incapable of writing essays. Laughing, Doon scheduled a meeting with her at the bus stop at 6 o'clock in the morning, promising to bring the notebook and help with the text. Beaming with happiness, Lucy set several alarms so as not to oversleep. The next morning, she was at the spot exactly at the appointed hour, but Doon was not there. In her memory, that day 3 years ago immediately surfaced when he had also made her wait. A feeling of resentment and anger began to boil within her, and just as she was about to leave, she stumbled and fell. At that very moment, Doon appeared before her, apologizing for being late. On the way to school, Lucy gave him instructions. He must remain silent during the conversation with the teacher and simply nod, agreeing with all the complaints. Looking at her serious face, Doon even jokingly suggested whether she had gotten into another fight. At school, Lucy introduced him to the teacher, who was struck by how good her student's brother looked. Despite the fact that Lucy was one of the best in the class, the teacher complained about her eternal absent-mindedness. This didn't bother Lucy in the slightest. She was just happy that Doon was nearby. That same school admirer was also close by, trying to find out if this guy was really her relative, but Lucy ignored his questions. In the office, Doon put on a whole performance. He began to scold Lucy in front of the teacher while inserting phrases about how much the girl respects and praises her teacher at home. This made such an impression on the teacher that she instantly changed her anger to mercy and forgave Lucy all her transgressions. The scene returns again to the present moment, where Lucy is waiting for Doon for studies. He did not come empty-handed, bringing her a carton of milk, which pleased her greatly. They sat down to study, but the girl's thoughts were occupied not by the essay but by Doon himself. She tried to question him about his life while he persistently asked her to focus on the assignment so as not to be late for classes. In the end, the work progressed slowly, and the essay remained unfinished. However, as Lucy was already entering the school gates, she discovered a surprise in her bag. Doon had unnoticed slipped her a fully finished essay that he had written himself. This brought her into a complete state of delight. That same persistent classmate tried to share her joy, attempting to make her laugh, and this time Lucy even seemed pleased with his attention. After classes, a heavy rain began and her parents asked Lucy to stay home, as Sang Yan was supposed to come and look after her. After a while, the brother returned and began looking for his sister, who decided to hide from him. Finding her, he offered to go out to dinner together, but Lucy, being capricious, replied that she would stay home and cook noodles for herself. However, her decision changed the very second she overheard her brother's phone conversation. He was arranging a meeting at a restaurant with a friend. She was sure that this friend would be Doon, and she immediately agreed to go. To her huge disappointment, Doon was not in the car, which instantly spoiled her mood. But the clouds cleared when Sang Yan stopped at the curb to pick up Doon, who was waiting for them nearby. Doon looked very tired and fell asleep on the back seat almost immediately. Lucy couldn't take her eyes off him, admiring his profile. Feeling a gaze on him, Doon opened his eyes and jokingly asked why she hadn't said hello to him when she got in. After she awkwardly muttered "hi," he decided to continue the teasing, asking if she thought he was handsome. Lucy was completely flustered. Sang Yan tried to stand up for his sister, asking his friend to stop teasing her. When Lucy, in a fit of embarrassment, stated that she didn't think Doon was handsome at all, he countered by asking why she constantly blushes at the sight of him. The brother and another mutual acquaintance in the car jokingly ganged up on Doon, calling him a bad guy, and Lucy, to hide her true feelings, supported them. And offended or pretending to be, Doon fell silent and didn't utter another word until the end of the trip. When they arrived at the restaurant, Lucy flatly refused to get out, demanding that Sang Yan first take her to the parking lot. The brother insisted on the opposite, and at that moment Doon noticed that something was wrong with the girl. She admitted that she felt strange and needed to leave urgently. As soon as she was about to get out, Doon lightning fast threw his jacket over her, covering her from behind. It turned out that Lucy's period had started and her skirt was stained. Lucy was struck by his insight and delicacy. Doon told her to hide in the ladies' room while he and Sang Yan went to the pharmacy for the necessary supplies. Both guys were extremely awkward about making such a purchase, but they managed and passed the bag through another girl. The situation was as awkward as possible for Lucy, but there was no choice. Coming out to the guys, she asked with tears in her eyes to be taken home, but Sang Yan showed rare sensitivity, calming his sister and saying that there was nothing wrong with it as long as he was there. They stayed in the restaurant anyway. When the waiter brought the menu, Doon, remembering Lucy's preferences, ordered a dish for her without beef, which she didn't like. This care touched her to the depths of her soul. Some more time passed, and we see Lucy in the company of her friend Minnie. They were heading to a common acquaintance's birthday party. On the way, they stopped at a cafe where Lucy was surprised to find Doon working part-time as a waiter. He greeted the girls and wished them a good time. While Minnie studied the list of dishes, Lucy literally didn't take her eyes off Doon, and he, noticing this, only gave her a warm smile. When it came time to pay, Doon stated with a serious face that she was missing a few coins. To her question why, he replied that it was a tax for staring at him. Lucy flared up and replied that if he were truly handsome, there wouldn't be any free seats in his establishment. Doon laughed and didn't take the money from her, saying he would pay for everything himself. Returning to the table, Lucy accidentally heard Doon's boss giving him an advance, as the guy urgently needed money to solve some problems. This news echoed painfully in her heart. At that moment, the birthday boy Fu-han, that same school admirer of Lucy's, entered the cafe. He recognized Doon and greeted him as Lucy's brother. The whole group decided to go to karaoke, but Doon stopped Lucy and advised her to go home so her parents wouldn't worry about the late hour. Lucy, listening to him, left. However, it later turned out that she did end up at the karaoke celebration with everyone. Fu-han, being in an excellent mood, decided that the perfect moment for a confession had come. He roughly grabbed Lucy's hand and pulled her into the center of the hall, which caused a wave of jealousy in Minnie, who had liked Fu-han for a long time. Not wanting to cause a scene in front of everyone, Lucy broke free and ran out into the street. The guy followed her. Doon also imperceptibly watched what was happening. On the street, Fu-han poured out his soul, admitting that he had loved Lucy since childhood. The girl tried to answer him with a refusal as gently as possible, explaining that she only saw him as a friend and didn't want to destroy their long-standing connection. Fu-han, whose hopes collapsed, couldn't hold back his tears. Lucy tried to comfort him, but he was inconsolable. Here Doon intervened, having heard the whole conversation. After the upset admirer left, Doon remarked that Lucy could have been more tactful with the feelings of a person in love. In response, Lucy asked him if he needed money, hinting at the overheard conversation in the cafe, but Doon refused the help, although he was very pleased to realize that she was worried about him. The next school day began with strangeness. Minnie completely ignored Lucy, not responding to greetings. Lucy didn't understand that the reason was simple envy of Fu-han's attention. At the same time, the PE teacher forcibly signed Lucy up for the high jump competitions for the upcoming sports holiday, as she always tried to avoid physical activity. The relationship with Minnie was getting worse. The friend demonstratively talked to others. The day of the competition arrived. Lucy saw Minnie actively cheering for Fu-han on the running track and finally realized the reason for their fallout. Approaching the registration desk for her stage, Lucy met her brother and Doon there again. Sang Yan began to openly mock his sister's sporting talents, suggesting she withdraw from the competition immediately so as not to embarrass herself. But Doon, waking up, wished her luck and officially confirmed her participation. He even brought her a headpiece so she wouldn't overheat in the sun and insisted on a warm-up. When Sang Yan started filming her failures on camera, Doon took it away, protecting Lucy's dignity. The jumps began. The rivals managed one after another, but when it was Lucy's turn, she couldn't overcome the bar twice because of fear. Encouraged in their own way by her brother and Doon, she decided on a final attempt. Taking a good run up, she jumped, but the landing turned out to be extremely unsuccessful. Lucy badly injured her leg. Everyone rushed to her. Sang Yan picked her up on his back, and then that same teacher who remembered Doon from the school visit approached. Confusion arose. The teacher couldn't understand which of the two guys was actually Lucy's brother. In the heat of the moment, Lucy shouted out that Sang Yan was her father. Doon immediately picked up the joke, confirming this kinship. An enraged Sang Yan lowered his sister to the ground, and then Doon carried her in his arms to the first aid post. There he personally treated her wounds, showing incredible care. At that moment, Lucy felt on cloud nine, but on the way home, jealousy stung her. She noticed that Doon was just as polite with other girls, which meant she wasn't special to him. Her brother, seeing her depression, bought her chocolate, and the world seemed beautiful to her again. The next day, the situation escalated. Lucy had extra classes, and Sang Yan instructed Doon to pick her up from school. At this time, Minnie approached Lucy and suggested going for a walk around the shops together. Naive Lucy was happy, deciding that her friend was no longer angry, but Minnie had a treacherous plan. Doon arrived at the school but didn't find Lucy. Security confirmed that there was no one in the classroom, and he began to get seriously worried. Meanwhile, Minnie led Lucy to a questionable place, an internet cafe, constantly asking if she had taken money. When Lucy refused to go inside, Minnie accused her of betrayal and went into a dark alley. Lucy, limping, went after her and found herself in a trap. They were surrounded by 3 older female bullies demanding money. Minnie, saving herself, pointed to Lucy. The bandits took the protagonist's wallet and, remaining dissatisfied with the amount, threatened serious reprisal if they didn't bring more tomorrow. When the bullies disappeared, Lucy told Minnie everything she thought about her friendship and wandered away in tears. It was at this moment that Doon found her, having run all around the neighborhood looking for the girl. Seeing her condition, he pressed her to him, allowing her to cry it out. Learning the truth, he convinced her not to remain silent and to tell the adults everything. The next day, justice triumphed. Sang Yan, Doon and their friends came to the meeting place with the bullies. While the guys dealt with it inside, Lucy waited on the street. Sang Yan and Doon scared the offenders so much that they returned everything stolen and swore not to touch anyone else. The wallet was returned to its owner, and Lucy, in a fit of gratitude, hugged one of her brother's friends. The whole company cheerfully discussed Sang Yan's heroism as they walked down the street. The story of this stage ends with Minnie transferring to another school, unable to look Lucy in the eye. Leaving, she left a note on the desk in which she asked for forgiveness for everything she had done. Lucy finds herself facing a difficult academic challenge when her exam results are released, revealing that she has performed exceptionally well in all areas except for physics. Recognizing her struggle, her father decides to intervene and find her a private tutor, initially appointing her older brother Sang Yan to the task. This arrangement quickly proves to be a disaster as the two cannot stop bickering. Sang Yan lacks the patience required for teaching. Whenever Lucy asks him to repeat an explanation for the 3rd time, he grows visibly frustrated and declares that he is quitting. Sensing the tension, their mother steps in with a solution, announcing that a different teacher will be arriving the following day. Lucy is filled with a mix of curiosity and excitement as she prepares to meet this mystery instructor. While heading to the kitchen for a drink, she is stunned to find Doon standing there. When Sang Yan reveals that Doon is actually the new tutor, Lucy is absolutely thrilled, though her brother tries to stall the start of the lessons by insisting Doon stay and play video games with him. In a quiet moment, Lucy tries to sneak a photo of Doon on her phone. He notices her immediately and, rather than being annoyed, begins to strike playful poses. Flustered and embarrassed, she pretends she was merely fixing her camera. When Sang Yan jealously asks why she is photographing his friend instead of him, Lucy calls him a monkey and retreats to her room, where she privately admires the photo and mimics Doon's cool expressions. The tutoring sessions begin, and Doon soon realizes that Lucy's lack of progress stems from a total lack of interest in the subject matter. To change her perspective, he obtains Sang Yan's permission to take her on an educational trip to a museum. On the day of the outing, Sang Yan refuses to participate in the learning experience, choosing instead to stay in the museum's gaming section while Doon and Lucy explore the exhibits together. As Doon patiently explains the various scientific principles behind the displays, Lucy begins to see the world of science in a new, fascinating light. She is particularly captivated by a specialized plant exhibit that casts beautiful floral shadows when touched. During their time together, she asks Doon about his own ambitions, and he shares his dream of developing a truly groundbreaking video game. When she asks about his love life, he explains that he is currently too busy for a girlfriend but makes a lighthearted promise to introduce her to his partner if he ever finds one. Lucy is unsettled by this thought and makes him promise that she must be the first person to meet her, so she can determine if the girl is actually a good match. Later, she secretly draws a sketch in her notebook depicting the two of them making a pinky promise over this pact. The piece is short-lived when Lucy realizes she has lost her drawing book, likely leaving it behind at the museum. A call to the museum confirms that Doon, being the last to leave the group, had picked it up for safekeeping. The next day, Sang Yan returns the book to her on Doon's behalf. Lucy spirals into a state of panic, wondering if Doon looked through the pages and saw the various drawings she made of him, which would make her feelings obvious. To cover her tracks and avoid any awkwardness, she concocts a lie about being on a dating app, hoping to convince Doon that she is interested in someone else. This lie triggers a massive family conflict. Sang Yan is furious that his sister might be meeting strangers online, and even their father is upset. Doon, though surprised by the news, tries to play the role of the peacemaker, suggesting to Sang Yan that such behavior is typical for someone Lucy's age. Sang Yan, however, is protective to the point of aggression, threatening to hunt down this mystery boy. Eventually, both men confront Lucy in her room. Too embarrassed to face her brother's anger, Lucy hides under her blankets. Doon takes the lead in questioning her, asking about the boy's identity and status. Lucy, weaving her lie to match her reality, says the boy is a college student 5 years her senior, secretly describing Doon. Doon, believing the lie, warns her that such an age gap is inappropriate and that she must focus solely on her high school studies. The situation takes a somber turn a few days later when Doon, while eating at the hostel, receives an urgent call from a hospital. His father's health has declined, forcing him to rush back to his hometown immediately. Lucy grows worried when he misses their tutoring sessions, eventually learning the truth from Sang Yan. She calls him to offer comfort, and during their conversation he reaffirms his promise to attend her graduation ceremony. This promise keeps her spirits high as she prepares a special gift for him. However, when Doon is back home, a mysterious girl visits him. He remains distant and cold, refusing to let her into his home and rejecting an envelope of money she tries to give him. The encounter clearly leaves him deeply upset, though the reasons remain a mystery. At the graduation ceremony, Lucy is mesmerized the moment she spots Doon. After the formal celebrations with her family end, she approaches him with flowers. He is surprised, assuming the bouquet was for Sang Yan, but she clarifies they are for him as her teacher. Before she can give him her hidden present, his friends pull him away for photos. She overhears them talking about moving away and returning to their respective homes, which fills her with dread. When she asks if he will forget her, he promises to visit whenever he can. They share a moment taking cute photos together before the day ends. That night during a graduation party, Sang Yan gets heavily intoxicated, forcing Doon to take him home. Because it is so late, Lucy's mother insists that Doon stay the night. Later, Lucy finds him sitting alone outside looking burdened. She tries to cheer him up, and in a moment of vulnerability he mentions he is in significant debt. Lucy sincerely promises to help him pay it off when she starts working, which makes him laugh. He tells her to use her future money for herself instead. Shortly after, Doon leaves for his flight to his hometown, sending Lucy a farewell message. He encourages her to study hard and promises gifts for good grades. Lucy reminds him of the promise from the museum, which he assumes is about the gifts, though she is actually thinking of the promise to meet his future girlfriend. Determined to follow him, Lucy works tirelessly to get into the same prestigious university Doon attended. For a long time, they communicate through photos of her grades and the gifts he sends in return. However, the connection is shattered when Lucy overhears her brother saying that Doon has a new girlfriend. Heartbroken and feeling betrayed, Lucy impulsively flies to his hometown to confront her feelings. When Sang Yan finds out, he is incensed and tells Doon to pick her up. To protect her secret, Lucy tells her family she came to meet her dating app boyfriend. When Doon arrives, he is accompanied by the same girl from before, confirming Lucy's worst fears. Doon is angry that she took such a risk, and Lucy retorts that he broke his own promise first. When he asks about her boyfriend, she lies and says they broke up because she was too young. Doon ironically agrees with the boy's decision, telling Lucy she should wait until she is older. This causes Lucy to break down in tears as she is actually crying over him. She eventually decides to cut ties, refusing his lunch offer and returning the teddy bear he once gave her. She even secretly leaves money for her flight ticket in his wallet so she doesn't owe him anything. Back home, she packs all her reminders of him into a box, determined to move on. Years pass and Lucy finally enters the university as a freshman. She makes new friends Rose, Lane, and Shin, and meets a sports student named Ming who shows a clear interest in her. In a twist of fate, Doon is also back in the same town. They initially pass each other without noticing, but they eventually meet at a party. Doon is shocked to see her and confronts her about why she has been ignoring his messages for months. Lucy lies again, claiming she was too busy with school and work. Doon points out that he was always able to make time for her, regardless of how busy he was. As she tries to avoid him, her friends notice the attention she gets from Ming, but Lucy is focused on her own complicated feelings. She eventually describes her friend's situation to her roommates, only to discover that the man she likes, Doon, has actually become a famous and highly successful game developer. Shortly after, her father calls and asks her to take Doon out for a thank you dinner. When she reaches out to him, Doon, despite his busy schedule, smiles at her message and agrees to meet her the following week. The next morning, the campus air was crisp as Lucy and her friends made their way toward their morning lecture. The routine of university life was suddenly interrupted when Ming approached them, clearly intending to speak with Lucy. However, before he could utter a single word, Rose and her new boyfriend, who happened to be one of Ming's close companions, intercepted the group to share a joyous announcement. They were officially a couple. The news was met with genuine cheers and laughter from everyone. In the midst of the celebration, someone turned to Ming to ask why he had come by. Looking slightly shy, Ming revealed that he had managed to secure an extra ticket to a highly anticipated movie for the following week and was hoping Lucy would accompany him. To his visible disappointment, Lucy had to decline. She explained that she already had a long-standing dinner commitment with Doon. Though she apologized sincerely, Ming's face fell and Shin, watching from the sidelines, felt a pang of sympathy for him. Despite the rejection, their friends playfully pressured Lucy to find a way to make it work, eventually leading her to promise that she would try to rearrange her schedule to accommodate Ming. Miles away in the quiet of his own home, Doon was dealing with a far less pleasant situation. A package had arrived from Jiang, the girl whose obsessive attention had become a constant burden in his life. Without a hint of curiosity, Doon tossed the parcel into a corner already overflowing with unopened gifts she had sent him. His patience had finally reached its breaking point. He sent her a sharp, final message, demanding that she cease sending him presents and informing her that everything she sent remained unopened and unwanted. He made it clear that he had already returned every cent of the money she had previously tried to force upon him, and he warned her never to call or message him again. Across town, Jiang stared at her phone, her eyes filling with a mixture of desperation and denial. She began to call him repeatedly, but Doon simply let the phone ring out, refusing to engage with her further. Doon's professional life was equally taxing. He had been working with such relentless intensity on his latest projects that he had completely neglected his own physical well-being. During a high-stakes meeting, a colleague noticed his pallor and brought him a meal, which he ate quickly before returning to work. However, the toll of the long hours finally caught up with him. As the meeting concluded, a sudden searing fever took hold of his body. Realizing he was in no condition to be out, he called Lucy to cancel their planned dinner. Even through the phone, Lucy could hear the strain and weakness in his voice. Panic seized her as she realized he was truly unwell. Overriding his protests, she commanded him to stay exactly where he was at the company office, informing him that she was coming to get him. When she arrived, she found him nearly unable to stand. Supporting his weight against her small frame, she guided him out of the building. Despite his pain, Doon managed a weak, characteristic tease, asking, "Little kid, where exactly are you taking this old man?" Lucy, though annoyed by the nickname, didn't bother to argue. Her mind was entirely focused on flagging down a taxi in the busy street. Her heart ached with worry as she saw how much he was suffering. Sensing her genuine distress, Doon apologized for the little kid comment, knowing she preferred to be seen as an equal. In the frantic process of getting into the taxi, their foreheads accidentally bumped, and for a fleeting second the world seemed to stand still. Both were momentarily stunned by the proximity, but they quickly looked away, pretending the intimate contact hadn't occurred. At the hospital, the prognosis was grim. The doctor informed Lucy that Doon's exhaustion had led to a severe physical collapse and that he would need to be hospitalized for immediate treatment. As she sat in the sterile silence of the waiting room, her mother called. Lucy explained the situation, how she was supposed to be at dinner but ended up in the emergency room. It was then that her mother shared a heartbreaking detail. Doon was entirely alone in the world. His mother had passed away when he was only 18, and though Lucy's parents had covered the funeral costs, Doon had spent years working himself to the bone to pay them back every penny. He had no one to look after him, no one to tell him to rest. Moved to tears by his solitude, Lucy went into his room and declared she was staying the night to care for him. Doon was shocked, urging her to go home so she wouldn't be scared or uncomfortable, but Lucy remained steadfast. Seeing his flushed face, she decided he needed to be cooled down. She went to the restroom, gathered some cool water, and returned to his bedside. When she offered to wash his face for him, he initially tried to do it himself, but his hands were too weak. He finally relented, closing his eyes as she gently wiped the damp cloth across his brow and cheeks. When he opened his eyes, they found themselves staring into each other's gaze at a dangerously close range. The air between them thickened with a sudden, undeniable romantic tension. Overwhelmed, Lucy practically bolted from the room, shouting that he should have warned her before opening his eyes. Behind her, Doon felt his face burn with more than just a fever, his mind racing back to the moment their foreheads had touched. Later, as they both tried to settle in for the night, Lucy's phone began to buzz with a barrage of voice messages from her university friends. She silenced it quickly, but the commotion caught Doon's attention. He asked if the messages were from Ming and whether the boy was her boyfriend. Lucy was quick to clarify that Ming was merely a friend. Doon then asked if she was popular at her college, and she replied with a playful confidence that she was indeed cute and well-liked by everyone. Doon fell silent, watching her until she finally drifted off to sleep in the chair beside his bed. The next morning, before Lucy had to return to campus, she asked if there was anything he needed. He requested some fresh clothes and his laptop from his house so he could keep up with his work. When she arrived at his apartment, her heart skipped a beat as she found a small photo of herself kept there. She took a moment to say a quiet hello to a picture of his late mother before gathering his belongings. As she was leaving, she spotted Jiang at the door again, knocking with a desperate, frantic energy. Ignoring the girl, Lucy hurried back to the hospital. She scolded Doon for wanting his laptop, insisting he prioritize rest over productivity. He laughed, nodding that she was scolding him just like a mother, to which Lucy retorted that she was glad he noticed her maturity. Their interaction was interrupted by an older man in the ward who asked if Lucy was his wife. Doon, with a mischievous glint in his eye, jokingly said yes, which earned him a sharp glare and a swift correction from an embarrassed Lucy. Back at college, Lucy's friends greeted her with breakfast and questions. After class, Ming ran up to her, his face etched with concern, asking why she had missed their rescheduled movie date. She apologized once more, explaining the family emergency at the hospital. Ming, ever persistent and clearly smitten, asked if they could try again the next day, and Lucy, feeling a sense of obligation, finally agreed. Upon his discharge, Doon returned home to find his apartment transformed by Lucy's care. She had left a trail of colorful sticky notes throughout the house, reminders of when to take his medicine, which fruits to eat for recovery, and instructions to get plenty of sleep. As he read through them, a profound realization hit him. Lucy was the only person in his life who cared for him with the devotion of a family member. He followed every instruction, a small smile playing on his lips. However, the peace was soon broken by a fresh wave of messages and calls from Jiang. He ignored them all, though the dark history between them remained a shadow over his happiness. Meanwhile, Lucy's date with Ming was going surprisingly well. They spent the afternoon watching a film and playing games at an arcade. When they returned to the hostel, they ran into Lucy's friends, who were excitedly planning a massive New Year's Eve celebration. Ming was quick to agree to join, but Lucy, true to her nature, declined, stating she had no desire to be in a crowded, noisy environment. Ming's disappointment was palpable. It was clear he was only interested in the party if Lucy was there. On the night of the New Year's party, the atmosphere in the dorm was electric. Shin had undergone a complete makeover, appearing so charming and cute that everyone was stunned. Despite their best efforts to convince her, Lucy remained behind as the others headed out. Ming stayed behind for a moment, waiting for her one last time, but when she confirmed she wasn't going, he finally left, visibly saddened. At the party, Shin's new look caught Ming's eye, and her heart soared when he complimented her, even though she knew his heart belonged to her friend. While the students were partying, Doon called Lucy. He wanted to make up for the dinner they had missed while he was ill. They met at a quiet restaurant where Doon insisted on paying as a gesture of gratitude for her nursing him back to health. Their peaceful conversation was violently interrupted when Jiang appeared, accompanied by a friend. Seeing Doon with another woman sent her into a blind rage. She began screaming at him, demanding to know why he had ghosted her. When Doon told her to leave, stating they had absolutely no connection, Jiang lost control and threw a glass of water directly into his face. Shocked and protective, Lucy didn't hesitate. She grabbed her own glass and splashed water back at Jiang. The confrontation escalated quickly. Jiang, now fuming, asked who Lucy thought she was to interfere. Lucy stood her ground, declaring that regardless of her identity, no one had the right to treat Doon with such disrespect. When Jiang raised a heavy metal tray to strike Lucy, Doon lunged forward, grabbing the tray from her hands and delivering a chilling warning. If she ever laid a finger on Lucy, he would not be so lenient. The restaurant staff eventually intervened, forcing Jiang and her friend to leave. In the aftermath, Doon was visibly shaken and damp. Lucy immediately took charge, giving him her own coat, gently wiping the water from his face and wrapping a warm scarf around his neck. Doon was moved to the core by her fierce loyalty. When she asked who the girl was, Doon explained that she was a ghost from his past, someone related to a tragic incident involving his father. Lucy realized that Jiang had no legal or moral claim to bully him and urged him to stand up for himself in the future. Noticing a small cut on his face from the scuffle, she applied medicine with a tender touch. In that moment, the realization began to dawn on Doon. His feelings for the little kid were shifting into something much deeper and more complex. Outside, the first snow of the year began to fall. They both looked up in wonder and decided to make a wish. Lucy closed her eyes and wished with all her heart that Doon would eventually return her feelings. Doon, looking at the girl beside him, wished only for her eternal happiness. Elsewhere at the party, Shin also made a wish, looking at Ming, while Ming wished that the girl he loved, Lucy, would see her own wish come true. The next day, Doon's happiness was cut short when he found Jiang waiting at his doorstep yet again. She offered a hollow apology for the restaurant scene but immediately pivoted back to her obsession, asking how he could be with Lucy. When Doon told her he owed her nothing, she brought up the dark secret of their families. His father had been responsible for the death of her father, and his mother had once promised to take care of her forever. Doon's anger boiled over. He told her that he had already fulfilled any perceived debt and pushed her away, retreating into his house. He collapsed onto his sofa, haunted by memories of the past. He remembered the day of the accident, the crushing weight of his father's guilt, and the way his mother had prostrated herself before Jiang's family, promising a lifetime of support. He remembered the school hallways where he was branded the son of a murderer, and the apology letters that Jiang had spitefully torn to shreds. The depression of those years had been a dark tunnel with no end. He looked at his mother's portrait and whispered an apology for the burden he still felt. But then his eyes landed on a photo of Lucy. A genuine bright smile broke through his gloom. He realized that she was the only light in his world, the person who made him want to move forward. As fireworks erupted in the night sky to celebrate the holiday, he took a photo and sent it to her, a small bridge between their separate celebrations. A Few days later, a friend called Doon to announce his upcoming wedding and asked if Doon had finally found a special someone. Doon's mind instantly drifted to Lucy, though he tried to dismiss the thought. At the university, Ming tried one last time to include Lucy in a group dinner, but she declined as she was heading to see Doon at his office. However, when she arrived, she found the workplace in chaos. Jiang was downstairs causing another scene. To protect Lucy from the drama, Doon snuck out through a side exit and took her to a different location. In his attempt to shield her from the toxicity of his past, he spoke harshly, telling her she should stop visiting him so often. Lucy was devastated. She had only come to give him a small camera so he could record Jiang's harassment as proof for the police. Hurt by his coldness, she left without another word. Believing he had pushed her away for her own safety, Doon watched her go with a heavy heart. Following the encounter, Lucy stopped responding to his messages entirely, throwing herself into her final exams as a distraction. Once the tests were over, she and her friends went out to celebrate their upcoming winter break. Lucy, missing Doon terribly, drank far more than she should have. Ming arrived and sang a romantic ballad dedicated to her, but a drunken Lucy barely noticed. When Doon called her that night and realized she was intoxicated and out late, he was gripped by a protective fury. He demanded her location and raced to find her. As Lucy stumbled out of the bar, Ming followed her, trying to explain the meaning of the song he had sung. In her drunken state, she accidentally fell just as Doon's car pulled up. Seeing another man touching her sent a jolt of pure jealousy through Doon for the first time. He brushed Ming aside, claiming his status as a family member, and after Ming left, he tried to lead Lucy away. Lucy was in a rebellious mood. She insisted she was an adult who could make her own choices. But her bravado failed when she suddenly grew ill. Doon didn't say a word, he simply held her hair back and then hugged her to calm her down. She slumped to the ground, crying about being fat and ugly. Doon couldn't help but laugh softly as he picked her up and carried her on his back. As they walked, Lucy confessed a secret. She was in love with someone who didn't love her back, someone who was kind to everyone and didn't see her as special. Doon, still unaware she was talking about him, felt a pang of protectiveness. He promised her that he would always treat her as someone special and bring her happiness, even if her crush failed to do so. The next morning, Lucy's friends grilled her about the handsome man who had brought her home. In her groggy state, she accidentally confirmed that he was indeed her crush, finally revealing her secret to her roommates. When the time came to head home for the holidays, Doon offered to drive her to the airport. Just before they left, Ming appeared to say goodbye. Doon watched from the car, his jealousy simmering. Ming finally confessed his feelings to Lucy, but she handled the situation with the maturity Doon had encouraged. She thanked him for the song and the sentiment, but told him clearly that her heart already belonged to someone else. In the car, Doon began to interrogate her about Ming, his questions tinged with suspicion. Lucy explained that Ming was just a good person and a friend. Doon then asked if Ming was the secret crush she had mentioned while drunk. Lucy was mortified, realizing she had overshared during her blackout. She quickly denied it and turned the tables, asking why Doon was still single. He admitted he was looking for a girlfriend and jokingly asked her to find him one. When Lucy noted that all her friends were her age, Doon surprised her by saying that was perfectly fine as long as the girl was at least 20. Lucy's heart soared, she was finally 20. The scene shifted to Lucy's arrival home, where her brother Sang Yan was waiting. Though he initially grumbled about the gift she bought him, a pair of glasses, he was secretly touched by her thoughtfulness. Their usual bickering continued, but there was a new warmth between them. Meanwhile, Doon's friend who was getting married continued to push him about his feelings. He suggested that the crush Lucy described, the man who was kind to everyone, was almost certainly Doon himself. Though Doon tried to deny it, the seed of the idea began to grow. At the wedding, the atmosphere was joyous. Doon found himself sitting next to Lucy after Sang Yan cleverly switched seats to avoid Doon's constant teasing. Doon messaged Lucy, telling her how happy he was to see her, but she was too shy to reply. When she missed out on a bowl of strawberries at the table, Doon noticed her disappointed expression. Throughout the night, he continued to probe her about her mysterious crush, but Lucy's answers were vague and stuttered. As the party wound down, Lucy decided to walk home alone, but Doon followed her. He had borrowed Sang Yan's keys and insisted on driving her. Along the way, he made a special stop to buy her a large container of fresh strawberries. Seeing her light up as she ate them brought him immense joy. He even playfully took one from her hand, a small, intimate gesture that left her breathless. When they reached her front door, Doon asked if they could travel back to the university together the next day. Lucy agreed immediately. Before she went inside, Doon reached into his pocket and presented her with a beautiful, delicate bracelet. Stunned and happy, Lucy rushed to her room and immediately searched the internet for the significance of such a gift. When the results confirmed that a man giving a girl a bracelet was a clear sign of romantic interest, Lucy fell onto her bed, her heart overflowing with hope and joy. The following day, Doon arrived to pick Lucy up for their journey back to the university, his eyes weary from a grueling all-night session working on his game development project. Noticing his exhaustion, Lucy offered him a portion of the breakfast she had prepared. He initially tried to decline, insisting she eat it all herself since he hadn't had a chance to eat either, but Lucy was firm. She split the meal with him, and the simple act of sharing a breakfast sparked a visible warmth in his expression. When they reached the airport, the morning took an awkward turn when an old acquaintance of Doon spotted them together. The friend immediately jumped to the conclusion that Lucy was his partner, only to quickly backtrack with a confused apology, mentioning he thought Doon's girlfriend was someone named Jiang. Doon's face darkened as he demanded to know who had spread such a rumor, prompting the friend to offer a hasty apology and beat a quick retreat. Lucy, catching the name, asked who this Jiang was, unaware that it was the formal name of the woman who had recently caused a scene at the restaurant. Doon clarified that it was the same person who had thrown water on him, pointedly asking Lucy if she really believed he would ever choose someone like that as a partner. Lucy's mind raced back to their earlier encounter at the airport years prior. She admitted she had assumed the woman with him that day, his company director, was his girlfriend. Doon couldn't help but laugh under his breath at the misunderstanding, turning his head away so she wouldn't see his amusement. Once they reached the university and Lucy had settled back into her hostel, she found herself unable to stay inside. She rushed back out to say a final goodbye to Doon before he left. Her roommate Rose, observing this frantic departure, confronted Lucy about the depth of her feelings, questioning why she continued to hide her heart. Lucy explained the complexity of their history. Since Doon had known her since she was a young child and had always treated her like a little sister, a confession felt like a monumental risk. However, Rose pointed out that his recent behavior suggested a significant shift. He was no longer looking at her like a sibling. This conversation left Lucy deep in thought, but she wasn't the only one reflecting. As Doon drove away, he began to piece together the inconsistencies in Lucy's stories. He recalled her stuttering whenever the subject of her crush arose and her claim that they had met at a bar, a detail he knew was fabricated. The realization hit him with a surge of adrenaline. There was no other guy. He was Lucy's first love. He connected the dots back to her sudden trip to his hometown and realized he was the dating app boyfriend she had used as a shield. Overwhelmed with a newfound joy, he immediately called his friend to share the revelation. His friend's lack of surprise, "I knew she liked you all along," only served to confirm Doon's happiness. The next day, while Lucy was at a cafe with her friends, Doon called. Rose nudged her to answer it right there, eager to see the drama unfold. Doon invited her to dinner, and while Lucy was occupied the following night, they set a date for the day after. Her friends were ecstatic, viewing this as her official first date with her longtime crush. In the excitement, Shin brought up Ming, but Lucy was clear. She had already established boundaries with him and they were strictly friends. On the night of the date, Lucy's friends transformed into a glam squad, helping her dress to impress. When she finally met Doon, he was genuinely stunned, telling her she looked beautiful. However, Lucy's mood shifted from joy to apprehension when he mentioned he was taking her to meet someone. She immediately feared the worst, that he was finally going to introduce her to a girlfriend. To her immense relief, the person waiting at the restaurant was actually his company director. Doon made a tactical retreat, pretending to take a business call, which allowed the director to clear the air. She explained that she was merely his boss and that the airport incident was strictly professional. More importantly, she revealed that Doon cared for Lucy deeply, mentioning that while he had seen her cry many times as a child, he now found the sight of her tears unbearable. This revelation shattered Lucy's insecurities. When Doon returned with other colleagues, he introduced Lucy simply as his friend rather than his sister, a subtle but powerful change in terminology that Lucy didn't miss. Seeing her overwhelmed by the day's events, Doon took her hand and led her outside. The physical contact left her in a daze, and though he let go to give her space, he could see she was affected. He confessed that he had arranged the meeting with the director specifically to clear up her misunderstandings. The evening continued with a trip to the cinema. While waiting for the movie, Doon bought Lucy a coffee, unaware that it contained milk. When Lucy mentioned her allergy, Doon was horrified at his oversight and rushed to replace the drink. Unfortunately, the slight exposure caused Lucy's face to flush red, prompting Doon to insist on a quick trip to a clinic. Later, with a small protective bandage on her face, Lucy took the medicine he provided. In a moment of quiet intimacy, Doon leaned in close, staring at her with such intensity that she became flustered. He called her cute, and when she tried to hide her face, he took her hands in his and continued their walk. Lucy joked that she felt like a dog being led on a leash, which drew a hearty laugh from him. He then asked to celebrate her upcoming birthday with her, an invitation she happily accepted. When Lucy's birthday arrived, she met Doon outside her hostel, but they were briefly interrupted by Ming, who wanted to present her with a gift. Doon watched the interaction with a hint of jealousy, and as soon as Ming left, he took the gift from Lucy, insisting on carrying it for her. As they walked, he teased her again about her secret crush, describing a man who was tall and handsome. When Lucy agreed with the description, Doon stepped into her personal space, suggesting that since he fit the bill perfectly, perhaps he was the one. Lucy, panicked that her secret was out, denied it vehemently, claiming she would have told him if that were the case. He encouraged her to think it over, but she walked away with a mock show of confidence. The tension followed them onto a bus, where Doon offered his hand to steady her. What began as a light touch turned into a firm, lingering hold that left both of them blushing. Inside the theater, Doon reached for her hand again, but Lucy pulled back, arguing that it wasn't right. Doon's playful retort, "It's okay, you're not my girlfriend anyway," left her speechless and unable to focus on her drink, though Doon seemed remarkably pleased with himself. After the film, he brought her to his home, where he had transformed his terrace into a beautiful, candlelit birthday celebration complete with 2 cakes. Lucy was moved to tears by the effort. As she ate, Doon asked what specific qualities she looked for in a partner. She described a man who was gentle, kind, handsome, and tall. Doon stood up to his full height, pointing out that he possessed every one of those traits and was therefore an ideal candidate to date her. When Lucy tried to retreat into the brother-sister excuse, Doon was firm. The dynamic had changed, and he knew her feelings for him weren't platonic. He asked for clarity, admitting the suspense was making it hard for him to breathe. Lucy, feeling the same weight in her chest, initially tried to deny her feelings before admitting she was confused. She playfully suggested he should propose a few more times to help her decide. Doon, catching her drift, realized that if she wasn't outright rejecting him, she was simply being shy. He promised he could make her birthday cake every day if she wanted, leaving Lucy laughing and blushing. Back at her hostel, her friends celebrated with her, and she shared the news that Doon had essentially proposed. The following day, she opened his gift, a high-end camera. While scrolling through the settings, she found a blurry, accidental photo of his torso. When she questioned him about it, he flippantly offered to send a high-definition version, a flirty comment that sent Lucy into another fit of shyness. However, the mood was dampened by a call from Sang Yan. When Lucy dropped a hint about liking an older guy, her brother was uncharacteristically stern, forbidding her from dating until after graduation. Despite his threats, Lucy couldn't help but smile at the bracelet Doon had given her. The following week was a game of romantic cat and mouse. On her friend's advice, Lucy played hard to get, turning down Doon's initial invitations to meet. However, when he called a third time, Rose insisted she say yes, as his persistence proved his sincerity. Ironically, once Lucy was ready to meet, Doon had to cancel 3 times in a row due to genuine emergencies at his company and his father's declining health. Lucy's frustration grew until she was practically punching her pillows in anger, but her annoyance turned to sympathy when the truth came out. Doon was at the hospital with his father, who required a major operation after 10 years of illness. A poignant flashback revealed the source of Doon's deep-seated sorrow. Years ago, his father had come home in a drunken panic after a hit-and-run accident. Despite his father's pleas to stay silent, a young Doon had called the police, believing it was the only way to save the victim. In the chaos that followed, his father had suffered a fall and the family was plunged into debt. Doon had wanted to quit school to work, but his mother made him promise to finish his education before she herself succumbed to illness. In the present, Doon felt the crushing weight of these responsibilities until he saw Lucy again at the university. Their reunion was marked by a moment of public boldness. In the middle of a class, distracted by his presence, Lucy pretended to sleep. Doon leaned in for a distant, air kiss, but Lucy surprised him by pulling him closer and kissing him for real. She claimed it was revenge rather than an acceptance of his proposal, but the spark between them was undeniable. Later, they attended a basketball game where Ming was injured. Doon stepped onto the court as a substitute, revealing himself to be a former champion. As he dominated the game, Lucy cheered wildly, and the truth of their relationship began to circulate. Shin pointedly told a heartbroken Ming that Doon was Lucy's boyfriend, not her brother. As summer approached, Lucy fought with Sang Yan for permission to stay at the university for an internship, though her brother suspected her true motives. He eventually gave her an ultimatum to come home, but Lucy stood her ground. On Doon's birthday, she surprised him at work. He joked about getting married because of his age, and Lucy teased him back, nodding she hadn't even graduated yet. She secretly coordinated with Sang Yan so that her brother would call to wish him a happy birthday. During the call, Sang Yan ranted about Lucy's older boyfriend, unaware that the man he was speaking to was the culprit. Lucy had to scramble to hang up before the truth came out. Night concluded at a restaurant. Lucy had decorated herself. She even attempted to cook traditional longevity noodles for him. Despite their questionable taste, Doon ate every bite, declaring them delicious. After he blew out his candles and wished for her, Lucy finally gave him the answer he had been waiting for, a resounding yes. They shared their first official kiss as a couple, and Doon confessed that she was his first and only true love. Sitting by the beach later that night, Doon bared his soul. He spoke of his father's coma, the debt he had carried, and his modest financial standing. He asked if she could accept a man with such a heavy past. Lucy didn't hesitate. She reached out to comfort him, promising that they would face the future together. In the quiet of the night, with the waves crashing in the distance, they moved forward no longer as a tutor and student, but as two people deeply in love. The following day, Doon was already waiting outside the college gates when Lucy emerged. She greeted him with her backpack in tow, mentioning that she was heading to the library to study. Knowing the campus facilities would be swarmed with students during exam season, Doon suggested an alternative. They could go back to his apartment where she could study in peace while he prepared a home-cooked meal for her. Lucy happily agreed to the change of plans. Once they arrived, he led her to his study table, ensuring she had a comfortable space to focus. However, instead of heading straight to the kitchen to begin cooking, Doon sat down right next to her. When she looked at him inquisitively, he admitted that he simply wanted to look at her for a little longer, confessing that he couldn't seem to get enough of her presence. Lucy, feeling a spark of mischief, leaned in closer to him, her boldness catching him off guard. As she eventually tried to pull back to regain her focus, he gently caught her, murmuring that he hadn't yet had his fill of admiring her. Lucy playfully insisted that her academics couldn't wait, eventually nudging him toward the stove. Lunch was a delightful affair, and Lucy was genuinely impressed by his culinary skills. After they finished eating, she insisted on taking over the cleanup duties. Doon didn't let her work alone. He followed her into the kitchen and carefully tied an apron around her waist. The close proximity created a palpable romantic tension in the small space. He questioned why she was so intent on doing the dishes now, especially since he knew she rarely touched them at home. Lucy admitted that she wanted to learn how to manage these household tasks so that in the future, he wouldn't have to shoulder all the domestic burdens by himself. She immediately grew shy, apologizing for thinking so far into their shared future, but Doon only laughed warmly and stayed by her side to help. Later that afternoon, the exhaustion of studying took its toll, and Lucy inadvertently fell asleep on Doon's bed. She was startled awake by the sound of his footsteps entering the room and, in her groggy panic, tumbled right off the mattress onto the floor. When a bewildered Doon asked why she was sitting on the ground, she scrambled for an excuse, claiming she simply preferred reading on the floor. He saw right through the lie but gently helped her back onto the bed. He leaned in as if to kiss her, but Lucy, still flustered from her clumsy fall, instinctively pushed him back. He apologized for the intrusion and encouraged her to rest properly if she was tired before quietly exiting to give her space. That evening, as Doon walked her back to the hostel, Lucy reached out and firmly grasped his hand. "I like you a lot," she confessed, the words clear and certain. Doon stopped, echoing the sentiment with equal fervor before pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. Their happiness was interrupted by a call from Doon's friend Bang. Detecting the sheer joy in Doon's voice, Bang pushed for details until Doon finally confirmed that Lucy was now officially his girlfriend. Bang was ecstatic and, in his excitement, immediately posted an announcement in their mutual group chat. Doon was horrified, demanding he delete the message instantly. When Bang admitted he didn't actually know who the girl was, Doon dropped several hints, eventually mentioning that she was graduating from a university in his hometown. The realization hit Bang like a freight train. He realized Doon was dating Sang Yan's little sister. Terrified of the potential fallout, Bang tried to hang up, declaring he wanted no part of the mess. But Doon insisted he stay on the line since he had been the one offering romantic advice all along. The secret didn't stay hidden for long. Sang Yan saw the cryptic message in the group chat and immediately grew suspicious, leading to a three-way call between the friends. Sang Yan jokingly called Doon a traitor and demanded to know the identity of the unlucky girl. Doon remained vague, promising to reveal everything once Sang Yan visited his hometown. Sang Yan agreed but added a request. Doon should bring Lucy back home with him since she was expected back for break soon. It was a moment that highlighted the deep, if currently misplaced, trust Sang Yan had in his best friend. Meanwhile, back at the university, life continued for Lucy's friends. Shin attempted to interview Ming for a project, though he remained painfully shy. When Lucy returned to her room, Rose interrogated her about the day. Upon hearing that Lucy had pushed Doon away during a near kiss, Rose advised her to take the initiative on their next date to prove her feelings were genuine. Lucy took the advice to heart and messaged Doon to set up a date for the following weekend. They chose a roller skating rink for their outing. Since Lucy was a novice, Doon spent the afternoon patiently teaching her how to balance. In the middle of the lesson, Lucy boldly announced that she intended to kiss him that day. The declaration sent Doon into such a state of shock that he nearly lost his footing. He stammered that she could change her mind if she wanted, but he quickly clarified that he very much wanted her to. They began a playful countdown from 3, but as Lucy leaned in, Doon's nerves got the better of him and he accidentally skated away. An annoyed Lucy gave chase until he finally came to a stop and apologized. When she finally caught up to him, she kissed him without further hesitation. Doon was breathless, jokingly asking how she could catch him off guard like that, to which Lucy suggested they simply do it again. They shared a long, meaningful second kiss, cementing their bond. As the semester drew to close, Lucy received exciting news. She had landed a job offer from one of the internships she had applied for. However, the joy was tempered by the knowledge that her parents expected her to return to their hometown to work. The following day, while waiting for Lucy, Doon was approached by a stranger asking for directions and his contact information. Lucy watched from a distance as Doon politely but firmly declined, stating his girlfriend would kill him if he gave out his ID. The interaction sparked a rare flame of jealousy in Lucy, which only intensified when a boy approached her later that day at a market to ask for her number. Doon, watching from a few feet away, felt the same pang of possessiveness. Lucy rejected the boy, but Doon remained grumpy, asking why she had been so nice about it. To appease him, Lucy stood in the middle of the crowd and yelled at the top of her lungs, "I have a boyfriend." Doon's jealousy evaporated instantly into a shy, triumphant smile. However, reality soon intruded upon their romance. Lucy's brother, Sang Yan, was livid when he learned she intended to stay at the university for an internship instead of coming home. During a heated phone call, he brought up her past mistake with the dating app lie, questioning her judgment and assuming she was staying solely for a boy. Lucy, hurt by his lack of faith, hung up on him. She attempted to text him the truth about her and Doon, but found that he had already blocked her in a fit of rage. Her first day at work provided no relief. Her team lead, Shilu, turned out to be a friend of the obsessive Jiang. Recognizing Lucy from the restaurant confrontation, Shilu immediately began a campaign of workplace bullying. She buried Lucy in menial tasks and humiliated her in front of the staff for not knowing how to operate the office equipment. That night, when Doon arrived with flowers, Lucy tried to hide her misery, but he sensed something was wrong. He gave her a stress relief toy to vent her frustrations, which she jokingly nicknamed Sang Yan, while punching it. The bullying at work intensified over the following days. Shilu purposely overloaded Lucy with files, forcing her to work through lunch and stay late into the night. Doon, who was also busy due to his director's illness, grew increasingly concerned when he realized Lucy was still at the office long after dark. He rushed to pick her up, and the moment she saw him, Lucy collapsed into his arms. She told him that his hugs were the only way she could recharge after such exhausting days. Despite her silence on the specifics of Shilu's behavior, Doon knew she was suffering. The situation reached a breaking point when Shilu, having seen Lucy and Doon kissing in the parking lot, reported back to Jiang. Enraged, Jiang confronted Lucy at a company karaoke outing. She attacked Doon's character, calling him the son of a killer and claiming he was unworthy of love because of his father's past. Lucy stood her ground, defending Doon fiercely and stating that he was not responsible for his father's sins. However, Jiang's parting question, whether Lucy's parents would ever accept a man with such a background, left Lucy shaken and silent. The secret was finally blown when Sang Yan arrived in town unexpectedly. He spotted Lucy and Doon together near the hostel and was paralyzed with shock as he saw them holding hands. The betrayal stung more than any ordinary news could. His best friend had pursued his little sister behind his back. Refusing to listen to Lucy's explanations, Sang Yan dragged Doon to an isolated location and struck him. He called Doon a traitor, his anger fueled by a decade of friendship that he felt had been compromised. Doon didn't fight back, telling Sang Yan to hit him until his anger was gone, but insisting that his feelings for Lucy were immovable. Eventually, Sang Yan's rage turned into a bitter exhaustion. They retreated to Doon's apartment, where the sight of Lucy's slippers and her favorite foods in the fridge served as a painful reminder of how long this had been going under his nose. The following day, Doon wore a mask to pick Lucy up, hopping to hide the bruises from Sang Yan's punch. Lucy saw through the ruse immediately and was incensed. She tracked down her brother and scolded him for hurting Doon, a display of protective ferocity that both stunned and secretly amused Sang Yan. The siblings eventually made up over a tense dinner where Lucy and Doon purposefully teased Sang Yan with public displays of affection. Despite the initial violence, Sang Yan began to grudgingly accept the situation, though he remained protective. He spent the next few days observing Doon's work ethic, noticing how the director's illness had pushed Doon to his physical limits. The conflict at Lucy's workplace finally came to a head when she presented a brilliant idea during a meeting that outshone Shilu. Shilu's subsequent attempt to bully her in private backfired when Sang Yan, waiting outside, saw Lucy in tears. Though she tried to hide the truth, her brother's protective instincts flared, and he offered her the financial support to quit if she was being mistreated. Shortly after, Doon also confronted Jiang one last time, delivering a final, chilling warning. While he had tolerated her harassment toward him for years out of a sense of misplaced debt, he would never allow her to touch Lucy's life again. Back with Lucy, Doon finally admitted he knew about the confrontation with Jiang and was upset that she had tried to carry that burden alone. They stood together in the quiet evening, both promising that from that moment on there would be no more secrets between them, regardless of the ghosts of the past. In a quiet moment following their established commitment, Doon led Lucy to a bright modern apartment he had been scouting. As they walked through the empty sun-drenched rooms, he confessed that he planned to purchase this specific unit to serve as the foundation for their future together. The gesture deeply moved Lucy, solidifying the reality that he was planning a life that revolved entirely around her. That evening, however, reality took a less glamorous turn back at the university. With the semester over and her roommates having already departed for the summer holidays, Lucy found herself alone in a stiflingly hot hostel room after the air conditioning unit suffered a terminal mechanical failure. When she mentioned the heat to Doon during their nightly call, his protective instincts immediately took over. Overriding her polite hesitations, he insisted she pack a weekend bag and come stay at his place until her living situation was resolved. The transition to sharing a domestic space felt both thrilling and terrifying for Lucy. After freshening up in his bathroom, she emerged to find Doon relaxed in his pajamas, a sight so unexpectedly intimate that she felt a surge of shyness and retreated back into the room. Doon, amused by her reaction, eventually coaxed her out, and they settled into a comfortable rhythm. He invited her to help him beta test a new level of the game his team was developing. While they sat side by side, Lucy found it impossible to focus on the screen, her gaze constantly drifting to his profile. Doon caught her starring and playfully scolded her to keep her eyes on the mission, but his own smile betrayed his distraction. As Lucy moved to reach for something, a stray lock of her hair became hopelessly snagged in the buttons of his shirt. The proximity was electric as she asked for permission to unbutton his shirt to free herself. Once the hair was loose, however, Doon didn't let her pull away. He drew her into a deep, lingering kiss that left them both breathless. Overwhelmed by the intensity of the moment, a flustered Lucy eventually retreated to the guest bedroom to collect her thoughts. The following morning, she slipped out early to head to her internship, leaving behind a carefully prepared breakfast as a silent thank you. As her internship drew to a close, Lucy prepared a series of thoughtful parting gifts for her colleagues. Surprisingly, she included a gift for Shilu, the senior who had bullied her throughout the term. When Lucy presented it and thanked her for the professional lessons learned, Shilu was visibly taken aback, her icy demeanor cracking for the first time. Lucy took the opportunity to address the elephant in the room, clarifying that she had never been a boyfriend stealer, and that Jiang's obsession with Doon was a one-sided delusion. She gently suggested that if Shilu truly cared for her friend, she should encourage Jiang to seek professional mental help rather than enabling her toxic behavior. Shilu remained silent, but the look of realization on her face suggested that Lucy's words had finally hit home. While Lucy was closing one chapter, Doon was celebrating a monumental success. The official launch of his new game was a massive hit, exceeding all market expectations. His company director, recognizing his tireless dedication and brilliance, promoted him to a high-ranking executive position. To celebrate, Doon and Lucy planned a romantic camping trip, but a sudden torrential downpour threatened to ruin the weekend. Refusing to let the rain dampen their spirits, Doon suggested they camp inside. They pitched a tent in the middle of his living room, surrounding it with fairy lights and snacks. In the cozy confines of their indoor campsite, the mood turned deeply romantic until Lucy's mother initiated a surprise video call. Panicked, Lucy hid under the coffee table, showing her mother the apartment while spinning a web of white lies about camping at a female friend's place. When her brother Sang Yan suddenly popped into the frame, he noticed the suspiciously masculine decor and teased her about the friend she was with, but Lucy managed to end the call before the secret was fully out. Back at the hostel, the roommates reunited. Shin, having finally completed her video project, delivered the recording to Ming. Encouraged by Lucy's own bravery and love, Shin finally confessed that she had harbored feelings for him since the day he first helped her with her books. Ming was stunned into silence, and though Shin told him he didn't need to answer immediately, she walked away with the bittersweet acceptance that a rejection was likely. Narrative shifted as Lucy traveled back to her hometown with Sang Yan. The homecoming was warm, but the secret of her relationship began to leak when her mother overheard her whispering affectionately on the phone to Doon. Her father, sensing the change in his daughter, began asking pointed questions about this new boyfriend, but Lucy skillfully dodged the interrogation, waiting for the right moment. That moment arrived sooner than expected when Doon took a few days off to visit her parents in person. To prepare, Lucy tried to butter up Sang Yan, convincing him to take her to a social gathering where she knew Doon would be present. Sang Yan, seeing through her schemes, realized with a shock that Lucy had been strategically using him as a bridge to get close to Doon since they were children. He was both impressed and horrified by his sister's long-term tactical planning. At a local restaurant with Sang Yan's circle of friends, Doon officially announced that Lucy was his girlfriend. The news shocked their old acquaintances, who still remembered them as the older brother and little sister duo. Sang Yan's public approval of the match was the biggest surprise of all, leading the friends to joke that he would have normally killed anyone else for dating his sister. That night, a slightly intoxicated Lucy walked home with Doon. When she questioned his supposed allergy to alcohol, he kissed her deeply, whispering that the allergy seemed to have vanished in her presence. However, the bliss was short-lived. Lucy's mother later sat her down for a heart-to-heart, expressing grave concerns about Doon's family history. She worried that the shadows of his father's past would eventually darken Lucy's life. Pressure mounted when Lucy's father privately called Doon. In a somber conversation, he expressed his respect for Doon's character, but was blunt about the reality of their social and family differences. He wanted a rich and easy life for his daughter, free from the harassment of Jeong's family or the stigma of Doon's father's comatose state. Doon, though pained, listened with the quiet dignity of someone who understood a parent's fear. When Lucy discovered this secret meeting, she was devastated. She reached out to Doon, reaffirming her love and promising that no amount of parental pressure would change her mind. Doon, trying to be the bigger person, claimed he needed to return to his own city for work, but Lucy saw through his stoic mask. Driven by a fierce resolve, Lucy packed her bags the next morning and told her parents that her feelings for Doon were absolute. She returned to Doon's city and met him, bringing with her a childhood diary. In its pages, written in the messy scrawl of a young girl, were her secrets, her crush on her brother's friend with his name misspelled, and her vow to earn money to help him pay his debts. Doon was moved to tears by the depth and longevity of her devotion. He realized that while he had been trying to protect her by stepping back, he was actually causing her more pain. He promised then and there never to let her cry again and to fight for their relationship regardless of the obstacles. Doon made a bold professional move to prove his commitment to Lucy's family. He resigned from his stable executive position to start his own tech company in Lucy's hometown. A move designed to show her parents that he could provide for her on his own terms and protect her from the ghosts of his past. During this transition, he received a call from the hospital. His father's long coma was ending in a final decline. Doon hurried to the bedside, finally releasing years of repressed grief. He spoke to his dying father about the tragedy his actions had caused, how his mother had died of stress, and how Doon had spent his youth paying for his father's mistakes. In a final, fleeting moment of recognition, his father's hand moved before he passed away. Lucy was there to hold Doon through the grieving process, and together they visited his mother's grave to introduce Lucy as the woman he would spend the rest of his life with. 2 years passed in a blur of hard work and long-distance devotion. While Lucy finished her degree, Doon built his company from the ground up in her city. Despite the distance, they remained inseparable through video calls and frequent visits. During a university gaming competition, Lucy and her friend Ling developed a project that won the top prize. Though Doon had claimed he was too busy with a product launch to attend the ceremony, he surprised her by appearing as a guest speaker. In the middle of his speech, he noticed Lucy couldn't see him from the back of the auditorium. He walked to the edge of the stage and announced to the entire crowd that he had to move closer because his girlfriend deserved the best view. The auditorium erupted in cheers as Lucy blushed with pride. The story culminated on graduation day. As Lucy and her friends celebrated their transition into adulthood, Doon was there, capturing every moment on his camera. Amidst the festivities, the group orchestrated a surprise. Under the guise of a makeup emergency, Lucy was led to a decorated plaza where her parents sang Yan and all her friends were waiting. Doon dropped to one knee, offering a ring and a promise of forever. As Lucy said yes through happy tears, a montage of their journey from the little girl with a crush to the woman standing before him flickered in their minds. Their love, which had survived tragedy, distance, and time, was finally recognized by all, ending not just as a romance but as a shared victory.